He was at the podium again. Navy suit, perfect tie, the kind of easy smile that takes years of practice to make look effortless. The local news cameras were there. They always were when Councilman Derek Hale gave a public address, and behind him, a banner read, "Claremont Forward, Integrity, Community, Family." In the second row, his wife sat with her hands folded in her lap, smiling the way she had learned to smile over 8 years of marriage. Neat, controlled, completely invisible. She had ironed that suit that morning. She didn't know yet. Well, she did know. She had known for 6 days. She just hadn't said anything yet. Because Nora Hale was 28 years old, and she had learned something very important in those 28 years. The person who speaks first rarely wins. Nora Callahan had married Derek at 19, which her mother had called a little young, her grandmother had called romantic, and which Nora now called, privately, a fact I cannot change but can absolutely work with. She had been young and hopeful, and absolutely convinced she had found a good man. Derek was 13 years older, charming, ambitious, already building the kind of local political profile that made people in Claremont, Ohio, treat him like someone worth knowing. He coached youth basketball. He remembered everyone's name at church potlucks. He gave speeches about community and integrity that made the editorial board of the Claremont Gazette endorse him 3 elections in a row. He was, by every visible measure, exactly the kind of husband you'd choose on purpose. The kind who had, it turned out, been living a completely different life for 6 years, funded by their shared money, conducted in an apartment across town, and supported by the quiet confidence that his wife was too young and too trusting to figure any of it out. He had miscalculated on every single one of those assumptions. Nora was not naive. She was sharp, genuinely, quietly sharp, in the way that people who are constantly underestimated tend to become. She had graduated top of her class. She ran a bookkeeping side business that 3 local clients depended on, and that she managed with the kind of organized precision that would have surprised anyone who only knew her as the woman sitting in Derek's second row. The problem was not perception. The problem was that she had been, slowly and expertly, trained to doubt what she perceived. You're overthinking it. You're too sensitive. You always spiral, Nora. These phrases, delivered with patient affection over 8 years, had done their work thoroughly. She had spent 3 years noticing things, the late nights, the weekend trips for constituent meetings, a name mentioned once too casually at a fundraiser and then never again, and then immediately dismantling her own conclusions, filed away under probably nothing, quietly archived and forgotten. She was done filing things away. The discovery had come on a Tuesday, and it had come by accident, which somehow made it worse. She'd been reorganizing the closet, looking for an old pair of his gym shorts because she was doing laundry and they needed washing, when a phone rolled out of a bundled-up gym shirt and landed face-up on the floor, unlocked, screen lit. She had stood there for a moment, just looking at it. Then she picked it up and read for 4 minutes. 4 minutes was enough. The messages went back 3 years. But the detail that knocked the air out of her wasn't recent. It was a message Brianna, that was the name, Brianna, had saved from 5 years ago, back when she and Derek first got together. He had written, "She has no idea. Honestly, she's 23. She barely knows what's going on half the time. Don't worry about Nora." 23. She had been 23 years old. She put the phone back inside the shirt. She put the shirt back in the closet. She went downstairs, made dinner, and when Derek came home at 7 and talked for 20 minutes about a zoning dispute, she nodded in all the right places. Inside, she was already building a list. If you're watching this right now, thank you. Genuinely. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love reading every single one. And if you're already rooting for Nora, hit that like button. It means more than you know. Now, back to our girl. Nora gave herself 1 week before she did anything. 1 week to observe, to think, and to resist the very human urge to walk downstairs at 2 in the morning and throw his laptop into the yard. She resisted it. It took effort. What she did instead was pay a different kind of attention, the focused, deliberate kind that she had been quietly discouraged from applying for the better part of a decade. She went through their joint credit card statements carefully, for the first time, with the eye of someone looking for something specific. The results were informative in the way that a smoke alarm at 3 in the morning is informative, technically useful, deeply unwelcome. There were charges at a restaurant called The Lantern in a neighborhood she never visited, twice a month, consistently, always for 2 people. There were flower deliveries she had never received. There were hotel charges during overnight conference stays that she cross-referenced with actual conference schedules she found online, a process that took approximately 20 minutes and that she probably should have done, she now realized, years ago. 3 of the 8 overnight trips in the past 2 years had no corresponding conference on record. He had been attending events that did not exist. He had billed their marriage, for the attendance. She found the apartment through public property records, a skill she had developed when they were house hunting 4 years ago. Derek was a co-signer on a lease for a 1-bedroom across town. The lease had started 6 years ago. 6 years. They had been married for 8, which meant he had signed that lease 1 year into their marriage, at a point when Nora had been 21 years old, pregnant with their daughter Lily, and busy believing she had a good man. She did the financial math on a notepad. The apartment rent, the dinners, the hotel stays, the flowers. Over 6 years, it came to just over $112,000, pulled steadily, quietly, invisibly from a marriage, while Nora had clipped grocery coupons because Derek said they needed to watch the budget. He had been very concerned about the budget. He had watched it closely. Apparently, it was easier to watch when you were the only one who could see it. The audacity was, she had to admit, almost impressive. Not admirable. Just impressive, the way a car crash is impressive. You can't quite believe the scale of it. She called her older sister Margot that evening. Margot was 34, a paralegal in Cincinnati, and had never fully trusted Derek, a fact she'd been diplomatic enough to mostly keep to herself, which Nora now deeply appreciated. Margot processed the information in approximately 45 seconds, and then gave Nora 3 attorney names before the call had been going for 2 minutes. The attorney she chose was Joanne Whitfield, 55, 28 years in family law, the kind of lawyer who had seen enough to be unsurprised by anything, but still got a quiet, professional satisfaction from a well-documented case. When Nora walked into their first meeting with a folder of printed statements, property records, and 3 pages of handwritten notes organized by date and category, Joanne looked at her with an expression that was not warm, exactly, but was the clear and recognizable face of someone who had just realized this was going to be a very satisfying case to work. Joanne asked how long it had taken her to put the folder together. 6 days, Nora said. Joanne nodded slowly. Then she said, "Stay calm, don't tip him off, and don't move a single dollar yet. The moment he knows you know, he starts moving things. Right now, you are ahead of him." Nora had spent 8 years being told she didn't see clearly. She intended to stay ahead. Joanne called the next phase documentation. Nora called it finally doing the math. Either way, it involved sitting at her kitchen table after Lily was asleep and going through 7 years of financial history with the focused attention of someone who had been told for years she wasn't good with details and had quietly decided to prove otherwise. She was, it turned out, excellent with details. Joanne's forensic accountant contact identified the payments quickly. Derek had been funding the apartment through a separate checking account, one Nora hadn't known existed, opened before their marriage, and kept carefully invisible ever since. The total, over 6 years, was documented at $112,400. $112,000 spent on a parallel life, while their joint savings account grew at a pace that Derek had called responsible, and that now revealed itself as the pace of a man who was investing heavily elsewhere. She also opened her own personal bank account, quietly, at a different bank, and redirected her bookkeeping income there. 4 clients, modest but consistent. It was hers. She had always deposited it into their joint account without thinking because she trusted him. She filed that particular habit under lesson learned and moved on. Then came Brianna. Nora found her through the lease documents. Brianna Cook, 32, a marketing coordinator who worked downtown. Her social media was partially public. She looked, in her photos, like a perfectly ordinary person. Someone's friend, someone's colleague, someone who had apparently spent 6 years being told she was waiting for a future that Derek had no actual intention of delivering. Nora sent her a message. No accusation, no anger. Just a photo of their wedding announcement from the Claremont Gazette and 5 words. "I think we should talk." Brianna responded within the hour. The response was long and, in places, barely coherent, the digital equivalent of someone processing a very large shock in real time. But the essential information was this: Brianna had known Derek was married. She had been told from the beginning that the marriage was essentially finished, that Nora was aware of the situation and had checked out emotionally years ago. Derek had been telling Brianna for 4 years running that he was almost ready to make things official after the next election, and the next one, and the one after that. He had been stringing 2 women along simultaneously, telling each of them a different story and collecting the benefits of both arrangements with the smooth confidence of a man who was very certain he would never be caught. The thing about being very certain you won't be caught is that it makes you careless. And Brianna, who had kept every message and email and receipt from 6 years of a relationship she had genuinely believed in, was furious in the specific and productive way that comes from realizing you've been used. She was not Nora's enemy. She was a woman who had been lied to just as completely, from a different angle, by the same person. She handed Nora everything, organized by year. It was frankly more thorough than most of Derek's official counsel filings. Nora made a mental note to appreciate the irony later when she had time. Through Joanne as intermediary, to keep things legally clean, Nora and Brianna assembled a picture of Derek Hale's double life that was thorough enough to be airtight and detailed enough to make his expensive attorney visibly uncomfortable when he eventually saw it. There were 3 years of message history from Brianna's backed-up phone. There were hotel receipts. There were 12 wire transfers from the private account. There were emails, including one from 2021, in which Derek had described Nora to Brianna as someone who trusts me completely and never looks at the statements, a line he had apparently intended as reassurance and which now served primarily as evidence. There was also something Joanne called the cherry on top, delivered with the expression of a woman who had been practicing family law for 28 years and still genuinely enjoyed a good irony. 2 of Derek's official city council travel reimbursements, filed and paid by the city, corresponded exactly to weekends when he had been, verifiably, at a hotel with Brianna and not at any official function. He had billed taxpayers for romantic getaways, twice. The amounts were modest, a few $100s each, but for a man whose current campaign literature featured the line, "Your tax dollars respected," modest was plenty. Nora noted this detail with the specific satisfaction of someone who had once spent 45 minutes on the phone with a grocery store over a $3 overcharge, because it was the principle of the thing. Joanne filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning in April while Derek was at a campaign breakfast. He was served at the event in front of colleagues by a process server who did the job with brisk professional efficiency. Derek called Nora 4 times that afternoon. His voicemails moved over the course of 4 hours, from controlled to agitated to something that could most charitably be described as an attempt at vulnerability. He was sorry. He had made mistakes. He wanted to handle things with dignity. He wanted her to think carefully about the implications, for his career, for the family name, for what a messy divorce would mean publicly. For 8 years, Nora had thought carefully about implications. She had edited herself, quieted herself, made herself smaller so Derek could be larger. She had smiled from the second row while he collected awards for integrity and family values, and her own name appeared in public records only as spouse. She did not return the calls. Joanne, meanwhile, had passed the city reimbursement documentation to Frank Olson at the Claremont Gazette, a veteran reporter who had covered county government for 15 years and who took public accountability the way some people take their coffee, seriously and first thing in the morning. Frank's story ran 4 days after the divorce filing, clean, factual, entirely about public records, no personal details, just numbers, dates, and travel reimbursements that could not be explained by any logged council activity. By noon, Derek's campaign office had released a statement promising full transparency. By 3, 2 of his largest donors had quietly stopped returning calls. Full transparency, it turned out, was not what they were after. Derek's first move, predictably, was to try to control the story. He hired an attorney within 48 hours, an expensive one from Columbus who specialized in high-profile family matters, which was a polished way of saying he specialized in keeping things quiet. He released a campaign statement calling the expense report story a mischaracterization and emphasizing his 12-year record of service and his unwavering commitment to family values. His campaign manager sent a follow-up email to supporters describing the divorce filing as a private matter that had no bearing on Derek's public record. 12 years, unwavering commitment, family values. Nora read the statement and felt something she could only describe as a profound appreciation for the sheer, unblinking nerve of the man. She had to hand it to him. Consistency, at least, he had. Then Brianna gave her interview. This had not been Nora's doing, not directly. Brianna made her own choices, and her choice was to speak. A local TV station had found her name in the property records connected to the apartment, reached out for comment, and Brianna, who had spent 6 years being told she was almost the official story and had finally understood she never would be, did not decline. The interview was composed, factual, and carefully limited to what could be verified. Brianna explained the relationship, its duration, and what she had been told about the state of Derek's marriage. No dramatic details, no private messages aired publicly. Just the clean, damning outline. 6 years, the promise of a future, and the discovery that she had been deceived as completely as Nora had, just from a different direction. She said, near the end, something that the station replayed 4 times over the next 2 days. He told me she was too young to figure any of this out. I think she figured out quite a bit. Derek's campaign collapsed with a speed that surprised even Joanne, who had seen a lot of things in 28 years. His 2 largest campaign donors withdrew within 48 hours of the interview, quietly, with no public statements, just politely worded emails about redirecting their support. His campaign manager resigned, citing personal reasons in a way that convinced nobody. 3 council colleagues issued a joint statement calling for a review of expense procedures, which was technically about expense procedures and obviously about Derek. The Integrity, Community, Family banner came down from his campaign headquarters 2 weeks later when the office closed quietly in early May. His state legislature campaign, 2 years in the building, the thing he had been steering toward through every speech, every endorsement, every carefully managed public appearance, was over before it had officially started. What remained was the divorce settlement, which Joanne approached with the focused efficiency of someone in their professional element. Derek agreed, after Joanne outlined calmly and specifically what a full public trial would introduce into the record, to the following: the family home to Nora, mortgage-free. Full primary custody of Lily with structured visitation for Derek. A financial settlement that included restitution for the documented $112,000 in dissipated marital assets, plus child support structured for Lily's long-term security, plus division of joint assets that finally accounted for 8 years of Nora's contributions being quietly deprioritized while Derek funded another life. He kept the apartment, 5 months left on the lease. Nora thought that was fitting, paying rent on a relationship that no longer existed in a city where his career had just ended, on a timeline he couldn't shorten without a penalty fee. If she'd been designing the outcome herself, she might not have done better. The woman Derek Hale had described, at 23, as someone who barely knew what was going on, that woman spent the summer finding out exactly what she was capable of when nobody was managing her expectations. The answer, it turned out, was quite a lot. She repainted Lily's room the bright yellow Lily had been requesting for 2 years and that Derek had always called too much. Standing in the doorway when it was finished, Lily made a sound of pure, overwhelming approval that bypassed language entirely and came out as a sustained, high-pitched exhale. Nora decided this was the correct metric for future home improvement decisions and planned to apply it broadly. She expanded her bookkeeping business, 2 new clients by July, 3 by September. She hired a part-time assistant, a college student named Priya, who was alarmingly competent and who Nora paid properly, because that was the kind of employer she intended to be. She had a standing monthly dinner with Margot at a restaurant they liked, where they split a bottle of something nice and talked about everything except Derek, because Derek had become, gradually and mercifully, a diminishing topic. She got a dog. A large, ridiculous golden retriever she named Chester, who consumed one of her good shoes within the first week and then looked so genuinely horrified by his own behavior that she forgave him immediately. She noted, privately, that Chester had demonstrated more remorse about one shoe than Derek had managed about 6 years of sustained deception, and Chester had done it without a press release. Derek, meanwhile, spent the year navigating the specific social climate of a small city where you have been publicly revealed as something other than what you claim to be. He took a job at a private consulting firm, government relations, which was a polite way of saying he was trading on connections he hadn't entirely burned. He was seen occasionally at his old haunts. People were courteous, because Claremont was the kind of city that maintained surface warmth even when the underlying temperature had dropped significantly. But courtesy is not the same as respect, and Derek discovered that reputation, once it shifts in ways that don't quietly reverse themselves. The city's expense review concluded in October. The 2 fraudulent reimbursements were confirmed. The total was small. The formal censure entered into his permanent public record was not. His photo disappeared from the community center wall during the annual display refresh. No announcement was made. It was simply no longer there. The integrity, community, family campaign photos vanished from his social media profiles one by one in the quiet and gradual way of someone trying to revise a narrative without drawing attention to the revision. If he had hoped this would go unnoticed, he had perhaps forgotten that Nora, who had spent 8 years paying closer attention than he realized, was still in the same city, still occasionally checking, and still thoroughly unsurprised by anything he did. By October, 8 months after she had found the phone in the gym shirt, Nora Hale had done something that felt small from the outside and enormous from the inside. She had stopped explaining herself. Not in a dramatic overnight transformation. Nothing real works that way. But gradually, the way light comes back after a long winter, she noticed she was no longer prefacing her opinions, no longer softening her sentences, no longer making herself smaller so the person across from her wouldn't feel challenged. She said what she thought at the volume she thought it. She moved furniture to where she liked it. She ordered what she wanted at restaurants without scanning the menu for the most reasonable option. These are small things. They are also not small things. She had a conversation with Lily around this time that she knew, even as it was happening, was one she would think about for years. They were making pancakes on a Saturday morning, Lily's favorite weekend ritual, conducted with the gravity of a trained professional, when Lily looked up from the mixing bowl and asked, with the direct simplicity of a 6-year-old who had not yet learned to make questions smaller, whether Daddy had done something bad. Nora kept stirring. Yes, she said, he had. Lily considered this. Then she asked if Nora was okay. Very okay, Nora said. Good, said Lily. And then, seamlessly, could you put the blueberries in now? Yes, Nora said, all the blueberries. There is a kind of intelligence that gets consistently overlooked, in young women especially, but in quiet people generally, because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make speeches. It doesn't correct you in meetings or dominate conversations. It watches. It remembers. It files things away with the patient precision of someone who understands that information is only useful when you know what to do with it. Nora had been 22 when Derek signed that apartment lease. She had been pregnant, trusting, and, by his private assessment, too young to be paying attention. She had been paying attention the entire time. She had spent 6 years absorbing and discarding her own instincts because she had been trained to. And then, in 6 days, with a folder and a phone call and the focused application of every skill she had been quietly developing while Derek was busy underestimating her, she had built the case that ended his career, restructured her finances, secured her daughter's future, and walked away with her house. She was 28 years old. She was, in every meaningful sense, just getting started. The lesson in all of this is not complicated, even if the people who need it most seem constitutionally unable to learn it. The quiet ones are watching. The young ones are paying attention. The woman in the second row, smiling for your cameras, ironing your suit, she sees you. She has always seen you. She is simply waiting with whatever patience she has developed over however many years of being dismissed for the exactly right moment. And when that moment comes, she will not announce it in advance. She will not give you a warning. She will just act. With a folder and a forensic accountant and a lawyer who has done this for 28 years and genuinely enjoys this part of the job. Don't mistake quiet for unaware. Don't mistake young for naive. And never ever tell a sharp woman she doesn't know what's going on. She knows. She's just waiting for you to forget that she does. In November, Nora took Lily to see horses. There was a stable an hour outside the city that did weekend visits. Lily had been campaigning for this trip with the sustained energy of a lobbyist who had identified the right target and was simply applying consistent pressure until results arrived. Nora had been meaning to go for months. There had always been something else, some reason to wait, some weekend that wasn't quite the right one. She stopped waiting for the right weekend and went. Lily, upon seeing an actual horse up close for the first time, went completely silent. This was unprecedented. She stood absolutely still in front of a patient older mare named Biscuit, staring with an expression of total overwhelmed awe for approximately 10 seconds, which, for Lily, was the rough equivalent of a full meditation retreat. Then she turned to Nora with enormous eyes and whispered that it was so big. "It is," Nora agreed. Could she touch it? Yes. Biscuit accepted Lily's careful hand on her nose with the unbothered grace of an animal that had made peace with enthusiastic children long ago. The expression on Lily's face, pure, uncomplicated happiness, the kind that hasn't yet learned to be cautious, landed in Nora's chest like something clicking into place. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep within 20 minutes, exhausted by joy, one hand still loosely curled as though she was holding the memory of Biscuit's nose in her palm. Nora drove through the early November dark, the flat Midwestern dusk that turns everything amber and quiet, and let herself be alone with her thoughts in the way she hadn't quite managed for most of the year. Not processing, not planning, not building lists, just thinking, the way you do when the pressure finally drops and there's nothing urgent left to do. She thought about Derek, briefly. She still did sometimes, the way you check a bruise that's mostly healed, probing it carefully to see how much is left. He was somewhere in the city, his smaller life. She did not wish him well, exactly, but she was also mostly done wishing him anything at all. The mental real estate he had once occupied had been, gradually and deliberately, converted to more useful purposes. She thought about Lily, about the years ahead, the horse phase and whatever came after it, the conversations they would have when Lily was older and ready for them, about raising a daughter who trusted her own instincts, who did not apologize for what she noticed. She thought about the phone falling out of the gym shirt onto the floor. Funny, the small accidental things that change everything. One rolled-up shirt, 4 minutes of reading, and then a folder, a lawyer, a forensic accountant, a reporter who believed in public accountability, a woman named Brianna who turned out to be an unlikely ally, and 8 weeks of the most focused, patient, carefully executed work of Nora's life. She pulled into the driveway, her driveway, in her house, fully and legally hers, and sat for a moment before waking Lily. The porch light was on. Through the front window she could see the lamp she'd moved to the corner she liked, the terracotta throw she'd bought because she wanted it, the general shape of a home that was beginning, slowly and deliberately, to look like hers rather than a version of hers that had been approved in advance. She woke Lily gently. Lily surfaced slowly, eyes still closed, and said one word. Biscuit. Nora smiled. She carried her daughter inside and put her to bed and went back downstairs and poured herself a glass of good wine, because she had decided sometime around July that good wine was no longer reserved for special occasions. It was for Tuesday nights and November Saturdays and any other ordinary evening when you had carried your daughter inside and felt, with the quiet certainty of someone who has come through something and landed on solid ground, that you were exactly where you were supposed to be. She had been told she was too young to understand. She had understood everything. She had simply waited, patiently, precisely, with the specific discipline of someone who knows that timing is half the work, for the exactly right moment. That is the thing about underestimating someone. You think you are making yourself safer. You are only giving her time. And Nora Hale had used every second of it.